Minister, I think it's nearly 40 years since the North Bull Island was designated as a UNESCO biosphere, and of course the last 5 years we've had the whole of Dublin Bay from Dalkey all the way up through the Booterstown marshes to Howth and to Baldoyle Bay designated as UNESCO biosphere. Now, I asked you before, I think, about the resources that our National Parks and Wildlife Service has to protect the bay and the coastline of Dublin with the 3 local authorities. It's more threatened than ever, Minister. So what are you going to do to protect it?
Minister Madigan has 2 minutes.
Thank you, Deputy. And the Dublin Bay Biosphere encompasses over 300 square kilometres of marine and terrestrial habitat and is managed by the Dublin Bay Biosphere Partnership, which is led by the 3 relevant local authorities: Dublin City Council, Dún Laoghaire County Council, in my own area, and Fingal County Council. And the partnership also involves other key stakeholders such as the Dublin Port Company and representatives from Fáilte Ireland and the National Parks and Wildlife Service. And the partnership works with community groups, NGOs, businesses, universities and schools, and over 300,000 people live within the newly enlarged biosphere. And they are biospheres internationally recognised for their natural resources and biodiversity, where nature and human activities connect. Yet they're also actively managed to promote a balanced relationship between people and nature, conservation on the one hand and sustainable economic development and human activity on the other hand. And another important goal of biospheres is promoting research and learning. A biosphere status is a designation which is granted by UNESCO as part of its Man and Biosphere programme, which was launched in 1971, where it has been established that there is a coordinated approach to the conservation of habitats, species and landscapes through monitoring change and supporting research, which fosters the potential for human activity and development. And while areas are awarded Biosphere Reserve status by UNESCO, they are managed in partnership by communities, NGOs and local and national governments. But it should be noted that there are no specific additional planning burdens or conservation requirements associated with biosphere status. In most cases, particularly with Ireland's 2 biospheres in Kerry and in Dublin Bay, the areas are already designated as SACs or SPAs and accordingly are already afforded statutory protections. So development within the biospheres is subject to the existing comprehensive legislative and policy planning framework, which is implemented by all of government. But the management of Dublin Bay Biosphere is led by the 3 local authorities primarily. And while my department is not the anchor component of the biosphere, it has nevertheless provided significant additional and expert support through the auspices of the National Parks and Wildlife Service, and it also provides small amounts of project funding from time to time. There was about 30,000 which has been provided in the last 2 years.
The rest of your reply will be in the official report.
Yeah, thanks, Cameron. Minister, I mean, you've identified the weaknesses of the whole biosphere structure in the fact that you're saying there's no protective legislation in place, there's almost no funding. I think you mentioned to me the last time I questioned you about this, there was €30,000 or something available to protect the Dublin Bay Biosphere, and we've only got the 2, we've got Kerry and Dublin, and a very tiny amount of money. Your own department, as you say, not an anchor organisation to manage the biosphere, which is extraordinary. Now, it was never more threatened, I think, the Dublin Bay Biosphere. We've seen overspills from the Ringsend plant again and again happening, wastewater being released into the biosphere. We've had other instances up and down the coast of raw sewage being released into the biosphere. In a few days' time, we're expecting a decision, Minister, from An Bord Pleanála in relation to the second major wastewater treatment plant in the Dublin region, which incredibly is being proposed by Irish Water to go out through the Baldoyle Bay onto the Velvet Strand in Portmarnock, and for which there's intense opposition in my own constituency. So, Minister, surely the department has to get more involved. Like €30,000, no legislation, that's not acceptable.
Minister, 1 minute.
Well, as I said, they already have statutory protection, but I do understand your concerns, Deputy, particularly in relation to the Ringsend waste treatment facility that you've mentioned there. And this is operated by Irish Water, as you know, and its discharge into Dublin Bay is regulated by licence from the Environmental Protection Agency. So any matters related to that regulated discharge should be directed to that agency. But the National Parks and Wildlife Service of my department does and will continue to investigate breaches of the European Community's regulations and the Wildlife Acts. So there is statutory protection there. And the National Parks and Wildlife Service also undertake to visit Natura 2000 sites as required and within the resources that are available to it. But it's important to note, as I said earlier, that biospheres are not an environmental designation. The environmental protections afforded to them are determined by their status as Natura sites. And I mentioned a lot of them are already designated as SACs or SPAs in the first instance. But they are internationally recognised for their natural resources and biodiversity. So they are very important, but there are no specific additional planning burdens or conservation requirements associated with biosphere status.
Question, Deputy.
And well, Minister, I know the Biosphere partnerships. They have the Biosphere Conservation Research Strategy, which I think was being headed up by UCD, and they had this project called, and I quote, "Acclimatise," and it was funded by Interreg, which was assessing the environmental pressures on the bay. And I just wonder, are you aware of? I mean, when will that report be available? There was to be a meeting of Irish Water, the Environmental Protection Agency, HSE, the three authorities as well, to discuss the pressures on the bay, I think, just last month, a few weeks ago. And again, are you aware of what's come out of that? And obviously, Minister, there is other major pressures that will be coming in the very near future. We have a constant campaign, I think, by wind farm manufacturers or wind turbines to promote the Dublin Array. We've heard of the project costing, I think, 1.5 billion, where developers of wind energy, they want to site something like 100 or 100 plus huge wind turbines on the Kish Bank, on the Bray banks, and they've been, I know, pressurising your government and Taoiseach Varadkar to bring forward the foreshore licensing so that they may do this. So the Bay is under enormous pressure, Minister, and surely the Department should be taking a core role in protecting it.
Yeah, we do take a core role in terms of the protections that are already in existence. But the Dublin Bay Biosphere Partnership is the management group which is responsible for the Dublin Bay Biosphere, and areas are awarded Biosphere Reserve status by UNESCO and are managed in partnership by communities, NGOs and local and national governments. But the partnership, as I said, is led by the three relevant local authorities, the Dublin City Council, Donegal Rathdown and Fingal County Council, and it also involves other key stakeholders such as the Dublin Port Company, as I mentioned earlier. Ireland has two biospheres, the Dublin Bay Biosphere, which is managed by the Dublin Bay Biosphere Partnership, which, as I said, is managed by the three local authorities, but the National Parks and Wildlife Service do not own any of the area making up this particular biosphere. And then there's the Kerry Biosphere, which is managed by Kerry County Council, which has input which does have input from the National Parks and Wildlife Service, because Killarney National Parks forms a significant part of that core area, and it is over 300 square foot kilometres. The main areas in the Dublin Bay Biosphere are North Bull, Howth Head, Killarney Hill, the Tolkien Baldoyle Estuaries, Boothstown Marsh and Dalkey Island. Thank you.